Jeff Redmond and Kirk are not with us tonight, so.
Neither one of them's on
No.
virtual either.
No, they will not be with us. They've notified me of that. Okay, this point, was the meeting properly notified?
Yes, it was.
And we are doing an audio and video recording of this meeting.
Yes, I'm recording now.
Okay,
Are you doing should I do the virtual as well? I'm doing the in-house. Pam, would you please record it since I can't have mine on your, it'll be the bottom right on your meeting. Be those three little dots. It says record meeting.
okay. With that, we will continue on the meeting. At this point, do we have anybody online or in the crowd here with public comment?
No.
Okay, does anybody have any public comment at this time?
Did you get it, Pam?
I'm trying to. Board meeting.
Yep.
Okay, okay, with no public comment available at this time, we'll move on. Our highlight on youth, I don't believe we have a highlight on youth this month.
Nope.
So we will move on to the next item, which is comments from our board members and superintendent. I'll start it off with Tim.
Yeah, one of the first things I had was just to follow up that Joe Donovan, a couple documents that I forwarded this morning after having a conversation with him. You know, based on the last meeting with him, I think it was Jeff Redmond brought up, you know, about the task force. We called it an ad hoc committee last time, but if we're gonna form a task force and get input from anyone in the community, form a committee. So Joe had developed an outline for that and sent it in a memo. Tweaked a little bit. One thing we talked about, if you look at in meeting 1, for instance, item B talks about an architect. So I said, well, we, you know, at what point, you know, should we be just interviewing or talking to architects and or construction managers or the firms that do both? At some point, we're gonna need, you know, kind of rough estimates on numbers for what the committee comes up with. So it's something I just wanted to bring up, that at what point would you like me to reach out and ask people, and what kind of process do you want in trying to select an architect and when, etc. Architects / construction managers / you know, ones that do it both. Because at some point after what the committee comes up with, need to cost it out. Joe would be facilitating all the meetings and the discussions, etc., as you can see. But that was one question I had for the board as well.
Okay. Is there anything else? I think at this point, you know, I would go through our strategic planning session in July, see what we come with out of there before we decide on if and when we want to move forward with something like that.
Okay.
If that's agreeable to us, the board members.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, the first task force meeting would be September / October, and then it would be, you know, probably 2 or 3 meetings before we would even need to start costing. And then, so that puts us into November-ish, where we would actually be needing them, but we probably want to solicit them a few months in advance or so to kind of get ready and do some background work. And then the other thing with that conversation with Joe is that you know, his company does the surveys as well. You know, School Perceptions does them. We used Morris Leatherman last time. So again, he's kind of he does it all. So he sent some samples that I included in that email, as well as some surveys with some school districts he's worked with and or is working.
And I think that was part of the reason we chose him, because he did all of it himself.
Yeah.
Instead of me.
Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else, Tim?
Yeah, secondly, just want to give you an update on the Washington DC trip. As I'm sure you know, this one had to be postponed, and it's something pretty special. I think our students remember for a lifetime and want to still provide that opportunity. So Luke Fritchie and Pat Hook and I think a group of 8th grade staff that typically go, saw an obstacle or a roadblock and try to look for a way around it. So we brainstormed quite a while ago now, a couple months ago probably. And he asked for permission to try and proceed and plan 2 for next year with next year's freshmen and of course the current 8th graders. So that this year's 8th grade would not miss out. They just would have to go next year. Wait a year. So he's made that happen. He's got it booked. Next year, May 23rd to 28th is the 8th graders. And then in June, they take next year's 9th graders, this year's 8th graders, June 20th to 25th. They also get Chris Buckle involved, because Chris will be a high school teacher that, worked with them, taught them all year too. And then we talked about an additional stipend for those teachers that have to go in June beyond their contract of $1,000 to cover those 6 days. So worked that into the budget with Jen and gonna make it happen. So I just wanted to notify you of that and commend the staff on finding a way to make that happen for our kids.
That's great.
And then lastly, the last thing I had was I shared that parent survey that the school reopening committee had sent down, looked at. We've met for the 3rd time. I think this was the 3rd Monday now we've met, get a lot of things done. Kids Care's ready to roll. Staff did a tremendous job of coming up with a document. Every detail is worked out and communicated, and they're in the middle of enrolling for Tier 1 parents, Tier 1 employees. And then weight room, we're pretty much done with the final plan as well. The county gave us the go-ahead to increase it to groups of 15 today from 10. So we're gonna plan on groups of 15 to 1. Again, cohorts, keeping kids together, not just on Monday, but every day. If you sign up for a certain slot, you're gonna be with that group of kids all week, each week, hopefully. And if you can't make it, somebody else doesn't come in to replace you, we just go a little short. So that sign up and survey is going out any day now as well for the middle school and high school. Right now, the high school's planning on 6 sessions and the middle school 3.
Middle school came out today.
Yeah, we got middle
It
school
did.
today.
Okay, good. And then we had some dialogue, asked about a staff survey, so I just wanted to get a little input. The committee brainstormed what questions and what information we want from the staff. The first one would be to your kind of point about, are you comfortable coming back? If not, why? What are some barriers? Through HR, we know which employees from back in March had underlying health conditions or family members in the house that do. We know there's that potential barrier with people individually. We obviously don't want to ask that specifically in the survey. We have that information anyway. But what would make you more comfortable coming back? Like what PPE practices and such could we have in place? Another thing is internet connection. We think we know some that we're having to come into school during this closure, but we weren't sure if it was for internet or if it was just to have a quiet space to work. So we'd like to find out about internet connections, see if that's a barrier, whether it's great, effective, poor, or not at all. Because we have hotspots for kids that don't have, we have 30 of them, but those would go to kids, back to kids in the fall, so we would need to know perhaps how to problem solve for staff if they have to work from home. And then an open-ended question, what other information would you like for the planning committee to consider? Kind of an open-ended question. Those are the 5 that we came up with. Are there any other ones that you could think of?
That's to all staff?
Yes. we have a plan, HR, working on a document, a plan for staff that, can't, work, or aren't comfortable, there's varying degrees, but, through the CARES Act, the Emergency Sick Leave Act, we can provide, 2 weeks, 10 days of paid sick leave. Then after that, they have to use their own bank of leave. And after that, if they're still, not comfortable or unable to, currently, the plan is, allow up to a 1-year leave of absence unpaid.
I guess I would suggest that we break it out into subsets for them if it's a person who does multiple roles. I would be comfortable teaching, not coaching. I would be comfortable not with my such and such group. So beyond your primary job, are there any secondary jobs that would cause you concern? I.e. coaching, mentoring, whatever, I think they might be 2 separate issues for people.
Right, like lunch supervision,
Mm-hmm.
and they have
Or
other,
coaching in a wrestling room versus teaching in a classroom. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not the same animal to me.
nope, you're gonna get more.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a way to ask, there may be, ultimately the plan is you may not be able to do your job, right? Let's say it's a job, I don't know, that specials, right, where you're seeing 150, 200 kids a day perhaps touching the same objects, and maybe it's just not feasible. I don't know a way to ask that, like,
Do you see any barriers to your job that, i.e. Shared equipment, touching, those sorts of things? And if your job wasn't able to be done this year, would you be willing to do something else within the district? Maybe, I don't know.
Do you
But
wanna
if
ask
you can't, if you can't have music, but you need the person,
yeah,
I don't know what that looks like, but
do you wanna ask them if they have a suggestion? Instead of just issues, like do they have a workaround or an idea of a different way to approach
Yeah.
it?
Cause I was thinking like art supplies,
I
there
would
could be
say
a workaround.
Comment.
yeah, I would say for sure that there's or even if you end it with, if you have other input or workaround or whatever to these barriers, let's have an in-person meeting,
oh,
because the survey is pretty impersonal for the music teacher to come, that they can't answer the question that you're asking vaguely, but if they stood in front of you in the music room, they could say, here's what we're going to do,
yeah,
So I think we need to get personal after the survey, if there's deeper conversations we should have, let us
Right.
know.
I know some are already actually happening like that.
Yeah, I'm sure they are, and I didn't mean to imply that they weren't, but
Yeah, yep,
if 8 bus drivers aren't comfortable driving a bus, we need plan B.
yeah. And speaking of which, that's right now our biggest concern that we don't have a real great answer for, other than asking, those parents if they're able to carpool, provide transportation. That's the greatest. I mean, if we're still, recommended to have small groups. I mean, putting 70 kids on a bus for an hour is
Yep.
not good practice, so, we're looking at everything, but we quickly learned double routing is almost $500,000 if we have to do it all year, every route. That's-
Right.
So.
And communicating the transportation issue is as normal is insurmountable, so we need the parents to help us figure out the solution to that.
Yeah,
Okay, is there anything else? That's up here.
that's all I have.
Okay, is there any other comments from any other board members or?
Just on that, I mean, that might be one to ask corporations, if they'd be willing to step up and help fund something. Because if you had to have people drop people off at work and you get larger companies, there are people, the folks can't come in, they have to drop off at 8 and leave by 2:30, they might be willing to help fund.
The transportation.
Transportation might be less costly than not having people at work.
And we might wanna leverage some parents to come up with a shareable document of some sort too. I can drive
Yeah.
here, you know, I mean,
Yeah, neighborhood
it's gonna take some
carpools.
community creativity beyond your close friend group.
And through Uber.
Cause it's, yeah, that just, the group size is one thing, and that's the first contact of the day. I mean, they're all put together right away, then all the other mitigation practices are
Yeah, all the ones.
useless.
And you
Pointless.
can't take temperature because you're standing outside,
Right?
so
Well-
that's not effective. If you want
That's-
to do that to mitigate, that's irrelevant.
Yeah,
to them.
and that crosses the most grade levels, and, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not most of your eighth graders were together with eighth graders, it's everybody, and then narrow and then wide again.
Again, the close contact rule, if student A gets it and they're with, 20 kids, I mean, even that's a huge deal, but it's 60 of the kids that they may have gotten. It's, then they're required to be home for 2 weeks, and just a real quick snowball effect.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. I don't believe we have any scheduled presentations at this time. So we will move into our financial reports. Scott?
Bank account balances as of May 31st, 2020. Citizens state checking, $903,526.11. Citizens money market, $12,253.95. Citizens money market fund, $46.52.98. Citizens money market suicide prevention fund, $19,148.25 for total bank account balances of $934,981.29.
Move to accept as presented.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion David, second Tricia, to accept the treasurer's report as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, which consists of our May 4th board learning meeting minutes, the teacher meet and confer meeting minutes of May 11th, our support staff meet and confer meeting of May 14th, our SCC school board meeting of May 18th, approval of the bi-monthly bills for the June 2020, approval of resignations and retirements of Brianna Lindahl as our assistant cheerleading coach, Vicky Berkvins is our head cheerleading coach, and I have another resignation here of Angie Brown, who is our one of our part-time elementary school counselors. We have approval of appointments and contract modifications of Brianna Lindahl, will be our head cheerleading coach. Vicky Berkvins will be the assistant cheerleading coach. Samantha Martell will be our full-time FBLA coordinator. Also approval of the 66301 agreement for intellectual disabilities programming with Baldwin-Woodville School District. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to accept as presented with your addition.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, David, second Tricia, to accept the consent agenda with the one addition as presented. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Pass these around, they've got a big pack of bills to sign. Which I believe will take us all the way back to almost March, so.
Oh.
Okay, moving on to the next item. Administrative reports, we'll start with our student enrollment update. Is, item 11A.
Alright, the last day of school, students in seats totaled 1,599. We started out September 3rd, Friday count of 1,608. We're down 9 students throughout the year. And for our open enrolled in versus out, you can see there on the bottom left, 311 of our students are open enrolled in, 107 out, a difference of 204. In the bottom right hand corner, our virtual charter school was at 202 when tallied this month, and we have 109 of our students open enrolled in seats to get to that 311 number. So 202 of our 311 open enrolled in our virtual charter school. And lastly, a free reduced lunch rate there in the middle on the right ended at 22.67% of our students on free and reduced lunch, total of 392 students.
Did that change because of the lunch program? Or was that that is what it always was as far as paperwork?
Yeah, that didn't change anything. The meal delivery program was eligible.
Was
Every
it?
student was eligible
Yeah,
for it.
it
It
was
had to be
a
free
separate.
reduced, yeah.
I think the numbers are up a little bit, but I think it's part of the, just the economic situation right now.
Yeah, we've statistically been right around 20% for the last 7 years.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on the student enrollment?
Some of them are from March, so they had a little time.
Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the next one. Item is an update on our high school academic performance. So, turn it over to you, Kurt.
Thank you. Take the mask off so you can hear me. Just have a quick handout here. You've seen this before, but I wanted to have it in front of you so that when we talk about it, you have a good reminder. Take one home for the wife. Well, thank you for letting me be here tonight to just share a couple of things. I just wanted to give an update on, typically this time every year I try to, in June or July, give an update about the academic progress at the high school, kind of some information. So I'm looking forward to that tonight. So I gave you our 10 grading practices because at the end I'm going to speak about some analysis that I did on traditional grading compared to standard-based grading, and I refer to this, and so I wanted to make sure that you had it in front of you. So just starting with some ACT results. The hope was to be able to get into the ACT portal before tonight, but they are having some issues, so we weren't able to, but this is the information I was able to glean so far. So ACT results for the class of 2021, our 5-year average composite is a 21.2. So all the scores together in a composite, our average is 21.2. The highest being the class of 2019 at 21.8. That typically puts us near the top 1 or 2 in our conference. This year we had a projected composite score in the fall for the class of 2021 of 20.3. So we took the pre-ACT in the fall, and then our teachers used that information to drive some interventions and so on. And so we ended up with an actual composite score in the spring of 21.1. Which on the ACT is a significant jump. So we're very proud of our class of 2021 and the staff for their work on the ACT. I did want to point out that typically we look at how many students achieve a 30 or more, which is, you could add both of my ACT scores together and still not get a 30, but those are kids that really have it together, and we had 12 students in that category. And typically 26 is kind of the marker for, you're getting into your higher end 4-year schools. We had 16 students in the 26 to 29 range, which means together we had 27% of our class of 2021 and the 26 or better. Very solid in terms of this whole class. I did not compare this to previous classes, this is the first time I've done that part of it, so I will work on gathering that data and get that back to you, when I come in with our Ect Results, I can have that information for you. So overall, very good, report, and great job done by our class of 2021 and our staff as well. If you have any questions throughout, just feel free to throw them out there. We have a program, I think everyone here is familiar with it, but it's a partnership with UW Oshkosh, it's called CAP, stands for Cooperative Academic Partnership Program. This year we had Math 108, pre-calculus, taught by Mr. Kimberly, and we had 20 students who took that class and passed it and earned 5 college credits. So we had 100 credits earned in that class. Students pay a third of the cost that it would regularly be, so it's typically quite a great savings for them. Also, UW Oshkosh and other state schools now are starting this, but UW Oshkosh is our partner. They're very generous in that if a student is on free and reduced lunch, they get even less of a cost to them. So it's $50 a credit for that student, rather than $100 a credit. English 101 taught by Mr. Jordines, college writing. We had 38 students pass that course for 3 credits, and so we earned 114 credits through that course as well. So this year, 214 credits earned through our UW partnership with UW Oshkosh. And one of the reasons we got involved in the UW Oshkosh CAP program is because the number of colleges, universities that accept those credits. Private colleges from all over the country, public colleges from all over the country, and that list just continues to grow. So it's been a great partnership. One of the advantages of CAP is that it allows students that they pay for that class up front, their portion of it, and if they pass the class, they're guaranteed the credit, as opposed to in an AP course, you have to pass the test at a 3 or better to get college credit. So there's more risk there for those students.
They also help with transfer and working with transcripts and stuff too.
Exactly.
I read that in the CAP program.
Yes, exactly. Oshkosh has been a great partnership. So they hit to AP, we've always been very strong in AP, we still are very strong in AP, we continue to work in that direction, but this gives families an option to get more of a guaranteed credit as opposed to taking that risk. But either way, great options, and giving students and families options is what we're about. So I'm very excited to announce that for the next school year, 2020-2021, we will add Communication 111, that's the fundamentals of speech. Mrs. Jordines will teach that. I don't know if any of you remember your speech class in college. I do. It's frightening, and so they can use that and apply that to their college. And then Math 171 calculus will be taught by Mr. Kimberly. So we're very excited about our partnership with CAP, and look to continue to grow that as well as our EP side.
Are these only offered to, like fundamentals of speech and English, are those only offered to seniors?
Right now, because we had 4 years of required ELA classes, that is an elective that they can take as a senior or junior. We tried to start it as a sophomore, but there was so much interest in the senior class that we really booked it all with incoming seniors. Great question.
Kurt, I missed it. Who is going to be teaching the calculus?
Mr. Kimberly. Other areas, we had 9 students complete our construction academy and earn credentials through WITC. That's through Mr. Wenzel head that up. We had 36 students complete 450 hours minimum in their youth apprenticeship program, their work experience program. Very impressive. I'm looking forward to having Mrs. Crowley come in and talk to you about the great job that she's done with that program, really growing it, and students want to work, and now they have an additional reason to do that and do it well. So thank you to her. There's 2 different programs. Start College Now is the 2-year version of getting your early college credits. Early college credits in the UW system. So we had 19 students that completed credits at CVTC and WITC. That's 19 students. Many of them completed multiple classes in those programs. So one of the things I want to do is dig deeper and see just how many credits that was, how many courses that was. And then in addition to our CAP program, also early college credit, we had 3 students complete courses through the UW system. 1 was online, and then 2 other courses through UW River Falls. So very active. When people wonder why students are coming and going, sometimes this is the reason. So we're very excited about that and very proud of our students. Advanced placement results will be out July 15th, so giving them a buffer of probably a week. Sometime in early August, I'll probably be back with AP results for you and share those with you. So moving on, I had a chance to do a research project, and I thought it would be a great idea to look at the impact of standards-based grading on student achievement as related to letter grades. And so I'm here just to show you that briefly, the results. So the research question really was, what impact does standards-based grading have on student achievement as expressed in letter grades? And particularly at the secondary level. Secondary level, high school, we are kind of the first ones through the wall in our area. Lots of schools are doing it, especially in Iowa, but we want some data. We want to know what's happening, if it's working or not. So I tackled this project. So here you're looking at standards-based grading methods, things like teaching to the fore, high number of formative assessments, retakes, reassessments, and then our 10 grading practices, which are the absolute backbone of what we do in terms of grading. The 10 grading practices, as I have told our staff, we can have conversations about these concepts, but this is not a discussion. We can have a discussion on, but it's not going to change. These are the things that we do in terms of grading. And we do them because, just as it says at the top of that page, they're fair and accurate. These aren't things that we've made up or conjured up. These are things that are proven to work, and so we're committed to those things. So every student that walks into the high school, their family can rest assured that those 10 things are going to be followed. And if they're not, I want to know about them. So I combine those two things together because they're almost inseparable. You know, the standards-based grading practices and our 10 grading practices are really closely tied. So I thought it's important to have those both in there. So some general information. We use the 2017-18, starting with that, those letter grade years, 17-18. And then through first semester, it was going to be the full year, but obviously we had an issue with COVID. So through the first semester this year, I looked at the individual grades for traditional and individual grades for standards-based in classes. So I used the 9th through 12th grade ELA, math, and science only. The reason I did that is because those are the only courses that are required for everyone. So we get a good look at freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Student demographics you're aware of, but generally we're between 435 and 450 students, approximately 15% special education, and approximately 60 students with IEP, with 504 plans. Those are approximates because they're different years, so rather than split them out by year, for this presentation, I give approximates. Okay, so hopefully it gives you a clear picture of what data I'm looking at. So, in that time frame, we had 3,452 individual grades assigned in a traditional model. We had 2,214 individual grades assigned in a standards-based model. When I looked at those and compared them, some things of note. A grades increased by 9.37%. Now, when you first look at that, you might say, well, that's just grade inflation, you're just giving kids grades. I would argue very confidently that it is not grade inflation, and we're actually drilling into what kids truly know. The formative checks, as I mentioned, the summatives and reassessments, retakes, they're trying to individualize that programming for the student and what they need, I think has really driven us. The simple philosophy is we're gonna teach to the fore, to the highest level we can, and drive everybody up. I think this is an indication of that. D and F grades decreased by 5.33%, and I's or incompletes increased by 3.15. And that's a positive, and I'll explain why. So an incomplete, if a student gets an incomplete, that just means they're not there yet. At the high school, we run into that problem. End of the semester, we have to have a grade, it goes in the GPA, it goes in a transcript. But if we do an incomplete, that gives us more time to work with that student. And so we like to see those incompletes go up, not in a crazy fashion. We want them to go up and F's and D's go down, which means we're not done yet with that student. So I ran a statistical analysis, and I used analysis of variance, which is called an ANOVA. That's one tool that we could use. That's what I chose to use. We could set a significance level. So if the alpha level that I said is at 0.05, whatever the p-value comes back as when the analysis is done, if it's below 0.05, that means it's highly significant. And so the results for us in our p-value, when we looked at all those and plugged it into the analysis of variance, came back at 0.0057, which is significantly below 0.05. Okay, what does that mean? That means that the results were statistically significant. That means that we have a high confidence that what we're doing in standards-based grading practices and our 10 grading practices are improving student achievement. Here's a graphic that I'd like to walk through. And this says the same thing that I just told you, but it's a lot more exciting to look at. So you'll note that the blue line are the traditional tracking grades, and those runs A all the way over to incomplete. If I could do this research again, I would segregate the D's and F's, but they're lumped together, and I'll explain that in a minute. Standards-based grades are in red, and the difference between the two is in yellow. So here you note that in the traditional grades, those 3,000 that we charted, 44.79% were A's, and when we went to standards-based, 54.16% were A's. That's an increase or a difference of 9.37%. If you go back a couple years, Tim will remember it well. I think Howard was in the crowd. One of the major concerns was that their grades were gonna drop. And we're finding that that's not actually happening. What's actually happening is their A's are increasing. Our B's show a nominal increase at 5.22%. Our C's have dropped by 12.42%, which, when you look at the rest of the D's and F's and the incomplete, means those kids have been driven towards the B's and the A's. So when you're looking at, we wanna teach to the 4 or teach to the A, we are trying to drive kids up. I believe this data shows that we're driving them up, because we're pulling kids out of the C's, D's, and we're moving them up. So I find that to be very exciting. And then in the D's and F's, you'll note that the traditional was 5.74%, and the difference was only 5.33%. But if you just look at the difference, it doesn't look like, well, that's not a very big difference. But look at the percent of D's and F's assigned in a standards-based grading model, 0.41%. It's tiny. And the reason is because we're driving kids up and we're not done with them yet. So you'll note that our incompletes have increased. And actually the standards-based grading here in red for incompletes is at 4.11%, and the traditional incompletes is at 0.9%. It's almost an exact flip, an exact mirror of the DFs and the incompletes, which tells us that we're moving in the right direction. So in summary, what I see when I read that is that we're moving kids from C's to B's and A's. They're moving up to the 4s where we want them. We're doing it with fair and accurate grading. And we're giving kids a chance to learn it in their time. And this isn't a free-for-all. This isn't just handing out grades. But we're giving kids a chance for that incomplete to come back and learn it the best that they possibly can. So the really great news is, based on this study, 99.44% confidence that standards-based grading is improving student achievement at St. Croix Central High School. Yeah, go ahead.
So is it improving student achievement, or is your p-value based on the grade, the percentile change inside of the grade?
Yeah, the p-value indicates that the percentage change is an indicator that it's has a significant impact on the performance.
Percentage change means it's a significant impact on the percentage of people in that category.
Right, so I'm sorry, so when you go back to the data that was, the percentage is another slice of the data, but the raw data that we plugged in came back with that p-value. So the p-value is associated with the raw data.
Okay.
Well, like the number, that raw number.
Like the number of A's
Right.
and the number of.
The percentage I thought was easy to see the difference.
Yeah.
Great question.
No, we use them all the time, so just.
Excellent, next time I do one, you're my partner.
My question is on so you're comparing is it last year when they didn't have standard-based grades to this year when you did? That's the comparison?
So 17, 18, we took those grades for ELA, math, and science.
Gotcha.
Nobody was standards-based. And then we took some of that pilot year the following year. So some of the ELA classes were standards-based, some were not. All of math was in that pilot year.
Yeah.
So there was some of that.
Okay.
That's where I could have gone back earlier, but I thought that was enough data to get us there.
I was just wondering if it's like same student to same student comparisons.
In places, it certainly is.
Yeah,
Because if you're taking an ELA class that isn't standards-based and you're taking a math class that is.
Okay, and then the, F rating was, what, the minimum, still 50% rather than 0?
Well, in this case, an F would indicate as a 1 for us in the standards-based model. We didn't have a 0 last year. We had ours were 1, 2, 3, 4. And now this coming year, we'll throw a 0 in there as well.
And it's based on like levels of knowledge. I know like the math stuff, I would help my son with that, and it's based on levels of knowledge, so it's like, you know, if you can do this hard one, which incorporates all the stuff below it, then you're getting a 4, but otherwise, yeah, so it's not percentage complete of a test or percentage right, it's levels of.
That's the big mind shift. It's not 87% or 50%, it's a.
Do you know what you're
it's a
supposed to know?
Degree of quality from high to low.
Would you say it's based on those levels of knowledge, like for application?
Yeah, roughly it is.
Kind
So roughly it's based on Bloom's taxonomy.
that's the one.
So moving forward, what are the conclusions? What does this mean in my mind? And again, there's lots to look at, but one, standards-based grading is having a positive impact on student performance. The 10 grading practices are essential to fair and accurate grading. Standards-based grading and 10 practices are best practice in teaching. It gives the kids the best opportunity to be successful. And then I think maintaining our practices is what's best for students. So we'll continue to work on those things. What's next? There's some things I want to look at. First, to look at the efficacy, self-efficacy of the student. Does this impact their own psyche on I can do this? I know what I see in my own home. I know what I see in the hallways. I know what I see in one-on-one conversation with kids, but I want to get some data where they give us feedback. Does this make you feel like you can accomplish it? That you're not done yet? And then on teachers, there's a teacher collective efficacy. Can we help students grow? What is the impact of this and these grading practices on that? And then what do these practices do on standardized tests? We saw a nice jump with our kids this year from their fall to their spring. I don't know if that means anything. I don't know if it's related at all to standards-based grading. So that's gonna take some time and some years to look at. And then the biggest one, which I probably would be my first thing I would look at next, is what impact does it have on our exceptional learners, our kids with IEPs, our kids with 504s? Because if we can bring all students along, we talk oftentimes about closing the gap with our exceptional learners. If this is the ticket to do that, man, what a great trip to be on. So, in summary, I think we're doing the right work. I think we're doing it the right way, and I think we're doing it for the right reasons. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Could you, get the data on those students that are not done yet, that you're reevaluating or reworking? Because I mean, typically you think about what used to be, like you get a D or an F and you get a D or an F and that's it, you're done, and now you're re-teaching, right? So then where do they sort of fall?
Where the eyes are up.
Yeah.
Great, will do.
I think the thing that was like, the number that jumped out at me is kind of that overlay that you're talking about in the future of overlaying this across the projected scores versus the actualized scores based on what you've done during the year. And then if you could look historically, which is harder, I get that, but what were those projections versus where you ended up? So is this more efficient at driving those scores just because that ECD is a little more standardized? But that makes, for regular people, it's probably a little easier to understand than a P value, because a P value, depending on what you use as your alpha, that's gonna be, depending on how significant that is, people are gonna struggle with like, what does that really mean generally? Like, we generally won't present that because people,
Yeah,
we
well,
lose
and I'm
people.
gonna tell you, when I said on my couch waiting to come here tonight, that was my concern, was can I explain that in a way that makes sense?
I teach statistics, I know what your p-value means.
So Brian, going back to your first
I
point,
just learned.
just so I wanna take every good idea I can, so look at the historical projections from fall pre-ACT to how they did.
I think that's probably gonna tell your story, or maybe could tell the story better for people to understand, is that what were those projections previously? And then where did we end up versus this year, because it looks like a really good story, like moving a point-ish is huge.
Yep.
On an ACT, right, generally you have to take it a second time to move a point, right, so you understand the testing and then redo it, so
Well, and then you have to
it
factor
feels
in,
significant.
did Brian give great effort in the fall, or did he dog it, and then in the spring, he looked like, you know what I'm saying? So
Or did
you're-
he play baseball in Prairie Farm the night before and get 12:30
I
AM
think we
the
lived
night prior?
the same life. Mine was a Legion doubleheader.
Data's hard, we're working with people, you know, so there's so many different things, others.
Well, I appreciate your time. If there are any other questions, I certainly will stay.
I've got a couple of oddball questions for you,
Sure.
kind of off the, subject matter here,
Sure.
but do we have any feeling as to how successful our online learning was for the last quarter of the year for our students
Well, I had our,
versus face-to-face? And I guess the second question I would have is, have we awarded, in some way, shape, or form the diplomas to our students that have been signed, or are we still waiting for our graduation ceremony?
great. So the success or lack thereof online, I think the best indicators, I sat with every PLC, so by departments, and they had the task of filling out a form that talked about what kids were struggling and what they needed yet, and then their recommendation, that they needed to retake the class, or they needed to complete certain work, whatever that might be. And I don't have the exact numbers yet, but the numbers are far fewer than what I thought it was gonna be, which may be a good indication. I think some students who struggled in school loved it at home. I know there's some parents in this room that had kids that really loved it, and there's some parents in this room that had kids that didn't like it. I would say that overall, based on the assessment that we went through the audit kind of with each department, I would say we're in good shape. I don't wanna do it again. I think we're wearing people thin, and there's this constant stress of I'm missing somebody or something because I don't get to see Brian or Tim or Howard in my classroom. I have to hope they're okay and try to connect and so on. So, I think, that I'm not answering your question with any kind of data, because I don't have it, but just my feel from seeing those reports come back is that many of our kids did everything they had to do to get it done and get it done well.
The reason I ask is some of the survey data that I've seen, that's a major concern of some of the parents, that their students are falling behind. And they are stressed because, they're having to serve as teachers and they don't feel they're serving as an adequate teacher.
Statewide or nationwide surveys?
I think it's what I've seen, from our own students and parents, and talking with some of the parents.
Yeah, that's fair, and just, I think it's important that those folks know, and I've had a couple of individual conversations where I've called students from my office, cause mom and dad said they're really stressed, and just, we are prepared for it. The teachers know, for example, I'm teaching English 9, and then the students go to English 10, that English 10 and 9 teacher, they've spoken, they know what they need to roll back and hit standards again. So we're prepared for that. I think there are certain students that it's gonna be important as we start to plan to reopen, that we have kids back that need that extra help, whether it be end of August or whatever. But I think the sooner we can start school, and whatever that looks like, but start full blast, ready to go into 2020, 2021, knowing that the teachers are gonna circle back and fill those gaps in, I think we'll be just fine. So if that helps in conversation in the community, that the teachers know what they're doing, we've prepared for that, and we'll be ready for them to come back. There are many cases, where teachers will have, let's say it's computer science 1, they'll just wrap that, what they didn't get in computer science 1 into computer science 2, those students that are taking that course. So the teachers are ready.
It might be computer science 5 by the time they get through this spring.
True.
I would say that having a kid in middle school and in elementary school, the middle school is a little bit harder than the elementary school, just because the math starts to get advanced, right? You start adding some new theories and new approaches and things like that. Versus elementary was pretty easy. It was harder to keep engaged in elementary just because it was a lot of the same stuff. But I know a number of parents that we logged on and actually did video chats with the kids before the teachers kind of got into the swing of doing that multiple times per week. We were doing that with a number of the kids just to walk them through like how to solve the math problems and a couple different approaches. So I think you had a number of parents that stepped up to help where they could. If you didn't have that, I would imagine, once you get into pre-calc and calc, then your percentages decrease, but.
Yeah. That's very fair. I don't mean to say we didn't have parents step up, cause I know they were. We also had a lot of teachers create videos and talk about calc. I mean, you can't learn that. I'm not teaching my son calculus, I can promise you that. And so he had to watch Mr. Kimberly's videos and so on, so. You know, I told the high school staff this from the beginning, that I think we will be better educators coming out of this. Because we've been forced to use a skill set we hadn't before. I think, to be just really honest, the fact that teachers were forced to call parents and break that barrier, it's not scary anymore. Cause I talk to parents outright, they talk to parents. And in a teacher role, it's a concern. I have yet to find a teacher that doesn't say, when I first started calling parents, I was always nerve-wracking because you never know what you're gonna get. It's like presenting to the board, right? It's a little nerve-wracking because you're not sure what you're gonna get back, but I think we're gonna be better, to be honest with you. I think we'll be more flexible. I think we can, and I told Tim this, and I think our district will do it better than anybody else. And that's just what I think, because I've seen it.
Al, I think another feedback that you may see is a greater appreciation of the teachers from the parents, because now they know what the teachers have to do to educate their children, and it's not as easy as they thought.
Yeah, it's not. And it's not easy being at school without kids there. It's just, the life is just, it's like, what happened? Where I was talking to Trish prior, that's been the hardest thing, is not connecting with kids. Just not having that goofy time at lunch, or, you know, seeing a guy finish a project or whatever.
Well, and I'll tell you, as a parent with 2 seniors and a sophomore and a 4th grader, all on Chromebooks, all doing that distance learning thing, every single one of them, more so than our 2nd grader, but the rest of them, the other 4, absolutely just completely missed that interaction with teachers and with other students.
Yeah.
It just wasn't school. We saw that most, I think, from the elementary schooler, of just, they need that social interaction, they need that. I mean, it's not even the schoolwork, he didn't mind the schoolwork, but normally working on schoolwork with friends or with a teacher, they all really missed that aspect of it.
That social is so important.
My kids too.
You asked about diplomas. So, we made the choice to have, to partner with Cahill and give students the opportunity to come in on Wednesday. They scheduled the time, I don't know the date exactly. And it was after our scholarship, video was done. And so we had scholarship and the diplomas in specific envelopes for kids. So when they would sign up to come to Cahill, to this auditorium and take a picture with Cahill, they would receive that. That's not the way I wanted to do it. None of this is the way I wanted to do it. We were filming actually for graduation. Tim was there in the auditorium, and I just commented to Tim that this graduation prior to the ceremony in the auditorium is unbelievable. It's just, that's my favorite night of the year, because for the kid, it's just electric in there. Well, we missed that. I mean, nobody wants it to be like this. So they got their diplomas that night, and so they all have them in hand, to answer your question. We are done with this, we are done with the graduation video. It looks great. There's some neat things in there that I'm not gonna share because I want it to be a surprise, but there's some, it's really neat.
Well, as much as when you called me, considering the virtual ed, and it was an early decision there, as much as I wanted to have the in-person graduation ceremony, I know if we were going to do a virtual, it was gonna take time to do it right. And I wanted to maximize that time we could.
Yeah, and I appreciate
And those school districts that have been contemplating or flipping between in-person and virtual, I know Hudson just went to a virtual. A lot of them are changing from the in-person to virtual, so.
Ellsworth had it in person.
Some of the districts in the area are still gonna hold an in-person of some form, but
They had a drive-through.
I think
Which
the large majority of them are going with virtual ceremonies, so.
Well, when I talk to my colleagues around the area, the virtual ceremony isn't, I mean, it's not what people might envision. It's, you walk across and you walk out the other side. It's not that auditorium, everybody together feel. It just isn't. And I feel bad. I have a senior son. I feel bad about it personally, and I feel bad about it for the kids and everybody else, but We're in a classic no-win situation. I mean, not just us, but parents, everybody, we're all in the same messy boat, so.
Yeah.
But we'll continue to serve kids the best we can and do the best we can by them, and that's all we can do.
Well, I appreciate your hard work, Kurt.
Thanks, Howard, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And making tough decisions.
Okay.
That no one likes.
Are there any other questions, Kurt, or any of the other?
I'll just say thank you for being prepared for the presentation. I appreciate the work and the analytics you put behind it.
Thanks.
Instead of just feelings, it's nice to see the data.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Thanks, man.
Because
Okay.
you understand the data.
Well, it makes it quantifiable, right? I mean, you can like, well, it feels better. Yeah.
When I was looking for somebody to look at my stuff, I should have sent it to you.
Man, I don't miss those days of the Innovus. Okay, then we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our student, staff, and community recognition. Ryan?
Alright, we have, first one is boys basketball team. The recognition, congratulations to the boys basketball team on their team academic all-state recognition. We are proud to be a representation of SCC as student athletes. Second, Jeremiah Hubbard, congratulations on the achievement of the rank of Eagle Scout. Next is Devin Wasley. Congratulations to Devin Wasley on his academic all-state regional or recognition in wrestling. We are proud to be a representation of SCC as student athletes, as a student athlete. Amanda Arnold, thank you. Thank you for your outstanding work in creating a combined video of individual SCC choir students singing the national anthem and granted for our 2020 virtual graduation ceremony. Your willingness to go above and beyond is noticed and appreciated. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you to all those that received recognition, and thank you to those that submitted those recognitions. So, if we have others that need to be recognized, please add that to the Google list. So, thank you for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion of future needs and priorities of the district. I think based on what I've heard on the previous meeting, I think as your request, Scott, was to gather some more housing data to get to our person for the better understanding of the population study. What's the status of that?
So yeah, Hazel is working on that. What she's doing exactly, I don't know for sure. And then she asked us, Pam's getting her the in seats enrollment data versus the, you said, well, this is kind of, doesn't tell us what we need for facilities. We need to look at the data for in seats. So you did send that to me.
I did tonight.
Excellent. Okay.
Would the data, like Brian mentioned, with the athletics and the data of the community use of our buildings, that's something I think we should take into consideration, don't you think? Because as our community grows, those use of those buildings outside of that school day, do you think that has, I don't know, just a thought?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's quantifiable with who signed up, but it doesn't tell you who wanted to sign up, couldn't, I guess.
But I don't
that could
know
come
that-
out of the ad hoc committee.
Yeah, I don't know that non-school use is going to drive referendum money to build. We're not building a gym because more people would have used it at night. I don't think that's the direction that the board, at least in my opinion, that's not the use of resources that I would recommend. If they're there, yes, they should use them more, but I don't think people are gonna wanna spend $6 million on a gym because more people would use it more non-students would use it at night.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to cover with regards to that? This is gonna be pretty much a standing agenda item until we get the details worked out of what we're looking at and how we're gonna proceed, so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the strategic planning thing, we'll learn more. Obviously, Joe Donovan's thing, tied to that. The admin team is doing our annual admin retreat where we we look back at last year, how do we do, and we look forward, and do some, development exercises, and then look forward as to what you know, our focus will be for the following year. So we'll obviously have that input to help and be part of strategic planning as well. You know, we're gonna discuss whether, you know, the top 10 goals still relevant, and, you know, the other 3 big pillars, et cetera. But we'll have a recommendation coming out of that this week.
Okay, is there anything else from any of the other board members in regards to that? Then we'll move on to the next item, which is consideration of our WIAA 2020-2021 high school membership renewal. We've received a contract here for our senior high membership renewal. It consists of 9 sports for the boys, 8 for the girls. No membership dues, which have been suspended as of the 2017-18 school year. But there is a sport assessment fee of $750 and non-contact co-op fee of $100 for a total of $850 payable to WIAA for the renewal. So I guess I would entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, a motion Scott, second David, to approve the renewal of the WIAA membership renewal. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next is the consideration of approval of the revisions of the SCC employee handbook. We received this about a month ago. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look it over. Any questions or concerns with regards to that? I think the thing that I raised is there were a couple of links. One, I believe, had to do with the Fair Labor Practices Act. There is a link to the federal government that apparently no longer is active. So if we can get that corrected in there. And I don't know if it was my computer or what, but the link, I think on, I think it was 2.06 was another section that I had trouble opening. I don't know if it was the I-9 form
Give it a
or
try right now.
I had trouble with that link
Says,
also.
please wait, if this message is not eventually replaced by proper contents, your PDF viewer may not be able to display this type of document.
Yeah. So, I guess if we could get those corrected, I would entertain a motion to approve the handbook as it exists.
Make a motion to approve handbook.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion with regards to that?
And that's basically just some housekeeping and links is all it is, making sure that they're accurate, right?
Correct.
Yeah, the one I could open on my work computer, but I couldn't get the PDF reader to work on my Chromebook.
Maybe we just need to update our.
Yeah, and I tried it on Windows 10 and it wouldn't open, so I wanted Adobe Reader.
I have
So.
noticed, because I'm teaching online, there is a lot of issues with Chrome all of a sudden, not having some things updated and not linking some things for my students. I've had to request to use a different browser, so maybe that.
Really?
Yep.
Our global IT department has pushed us all to Chrome because of the stability.
It's your call.
And that's what I suggested to all my students was Chrome, and then I started this new course and they're having issues. And
Well, it's still a PC, so.
yeah, it was suggested go to Firefox and poof, they're,
Or drop in Explorer because it's not working at work, so like, I don't know. Yes.
it's still technology.
Netscape. That's
Yeah.
You're dating yourself, David. Okay, We have a motion and a second to approve it. Have,
Yep, yep.
I guess all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is consideration of approval of adding liquidated damages for extracurricular assignments. Okay,
So I don't know how to join it up, I can't turn it off. So it'd be nice to display so that, maybe I'll just hook it up to yours.
okay.
So Chance and Brian.
You wanna run it?
Well, I just need something up there. Why is there only one person? Shows 11. Your grid view, yeah.
And my grid
That
view
grid
got
view has
disabled.
been okay.
Well, as long as you can hear so that Brian, when Brian, Chance, and whoever else talks,
Let's see.
they can hear.
Okay, I've enabled the grid view, but I don't know what's,
I'll start. So after the last meeting, it, said we put it in writing, so it worked with Pam. Pam said, well, let's just put it in the same format and mirror language that's in the teacher liquidated damages. So this mirrors the teacher liquidated damages language and format and everything, minus the little bit of spin, you know, or the draft that we came up with. So, you know, A2 specifically talks about 15%, and the 30 days.
I guess, yeah, he was just saying Pam.
So Pam, it should say 30 days actually, right?
It
It's
does
got
on the
that.
second one.
Yeah, 102A1 should say 30 days.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that happened, because we had that in there.
That's
And then the rest is mirroring language, you know, illness of employee was one of the reasons they listed military service, but other reasons is determined by the board would be the extenuating circumstances, obviously. So that is the policy, sample policy, you know, presented for your consideration. We would make that 30 days, not
Yeah.
60. It's supposed to be 30.
okay.
I guess I'm still of the opinion that, especially after talking to Chance and then getting that letter from Jason, it just seems unnecessary.
After talking to Chance.
Well, yeah, Chance had said like, oh, it's rare, one, maybe two, and then, Jason's letter was the same. I don't know. I mean, if it's a policy you really want, I mean, I don't think it's gonna come into play a lot, at least it doesn't seem that way historically, based on their opinions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have the data regarding teacher liquidated damages. You
Yep.
know, we had 11 resignations so far this current year, one of which we've imposed liquidated damages. So it happened 9% of the time. Last year, 12, of which one imposed liquidated damages. And the year before, 5 teacher, these are all
All
teacher,
teachers, right.
teacher resignations, not staff.
But I think
So
that's different, like they might get a job somewhere else type thing or move, you know what I mean? I don't know.
I don't think it's any different to our students.
No,
Our students don't care where they're going, but if they cut short before, I mean, our students aren't gonna care if they're going to another state or another
it's not gonna
district or
prevent that,
or
it's not
whatever.
gonna prevent that.
No, I'm not saying it's gonna prevent it, but it may make somebody think twice about the effect, I guess, on the district.
I think that the people who do this is a glorified volunteer position, and they always think about those students, and they're not going to quit something at a short notice like that unless they really have to.
That's, the data doesn't
I mean,
back that up.
but Chance said there were 2, and Jason said there were 1, that seems,
Chance has the data.
at least, because that's what they
Yeah.
said, it just seemed.
Well, I guess if Chance is there, can he,
And like I said,
Right,
I'll
yeah.
vote for it, but it just seems unnecessary based on what they had told us.
Again, can you guys,
Yep, we can
Can you
hear
hear
you.
me okay, Howard?
Yeah, go ahead.
But my video's not working, right? I mean, I have the data in front of me, but I can just read it.
Yep.
Alright, so I went back and looked, after our last meeting and, even Brian's question about, how are you gonna measure this? What's the goal, or how are you gonna know if it's working or not? So I went, and of course, the amazing Pam Katner had a spreadsheet already with all the data, of course she does. So I just went to the last 3 years, just in the extracurricular athletics and activities. In 2017, there was 27 resignations, 3 of which happened within 30 days of it starting. 2018-19, there was 37 resignations, 2 of which were within that 30-day window. And then last year, there was 39 resignations, and 5 of those were within that 30-day window.
So we're at 10.
So over the last 3 years, that's 103, I think, 10 of which were within the 30-day window. Now, all 10 of those I don't think, in my opinion, went on the liquidated damages route, because there was definitely some extenuating circumstances within those 10 that I know of off the top of my head. But it was a mix. There was, I think, 2 or 3 at the elementary, 3 or 4 at the middle school, and then a couple at the high school. So it was kind of a mix across the board.
I guess it begs a different question in my mind, and that is, how are we going to encourage more people to take on these roles, since it's so hard for them to find them? I mean,
So you think it's prohibitive if I'm not gonna sign up for this because I don't think I can resign within 30 days
no,
or
that's not
more?
what I'm saying. I'm saying on a different topic. This is language in a contract, and that doesn't bother me. I'm saying besides this, the big mention was they're having trouble finding people in general, don't you? I mean, that's a bigger
Sure.
issue, isn't it? How are we gonna get?
Yeah, well, and Tricia's point is valid, and I'm not sure what.
Separate from
yeah, if you
this.
figure that out, Tricia, let me know,
Yeah.
because that's, it's been I don't know if it's a current trend or, lately it's a trend where,
Right.
I don't know, people are busier and busier, and, I don't know, life is swirling for everybody. But yeah, back to your point about this, certainly, the whole reason this was even brought up is zero to do with hoping people don't resign. It's the same amount of work for Jason or Brian or Pam or me or any administrators. If somebody resigns 3 days, 30 days, or 300 days before the season begins, it's the same amount of work on us.
Yeah.
The impact, though, is on the kids if it's 3 days. Those are the ones that are gonna be impacted negatively the shorter that time period is.
We chose 30 days because typically two weeks, to post it, 2 weeks to hire, and then we're right up against it. So, like, I think most jobs, not all, ask or require at least 2 weeks notice, for the same reason. I mean, it's just, it's only a bad thing if somebody does a bad thing, right? And there's lots of extenuating circumstances that aren't.
Well, I guess
Bad.
that's what I'm looking at with this, I guess, is the extenuating circumstances opens it up for us to say, yes, this is an exception. This, when you look at, if you boil it right down to, I guess, a teacher teaching students and a coach coaching students, they're both doing basically the same thing. Granted, they're very different, but they're teaching those kids something, whether it's a sport or whether it's respect or whether it's academics, whatever it is. I don't understand why, and this is just me personally, I don't understand why this is it seems like it's a big deal to have this be the same along the lines of the teaching side of things, because they're doing basically the same job, they're teaching those kids something. We're still allowing for extenuating circumstances, so, Chance, I think you said there was 10 in there, and for sure that, in those 3 years of data, for sure there was just some extenuating circumstances there. So it's not like we're throwing the policy willy-nilly at people and just saying, no, we don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, I don't understand, I guess, I don't understand what appears to be the fear of having this in there if we're not concerned about people abusing it, or,
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand why this seems to be a sticking point.
Now, part of my issue with this, why I'm waffling on this is, you know, are we going to force a coach that doesn't want to coach into a position that he doesn't wanna do, and therefore, then the kids suffer because he's not gonna do a very good job because his heart's not into it.
We don't want that, but you think somebody would keep coaching rather than pay liquidated damages?
That's what I would be afraid of.
I think it's more, people see it as a message, and when I listen to John Tackman, and I don't wanna put words in anyone's mouth, but I think when these policies come in and you've been a coach for a long time, you think, wow, really? You think I'm gonna do that to you? That's what you think of me? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a lowest common denominator policy, and as much as it's not directed at them, they feel it is. Do you know
That's
what I
the
mean?
thing, is this policy is bigger than one person.
Right,
This
it's
policy is policy across the board, across future employees, current employees, whatever. This is not directed at any one individual.
But,
That's how they.
you know, going to the lowest common denominator, one of my fears there is that if we accept behavior like this, resignation, then that boils down to the whole staff, and then that's when things go down to the least common denominator. If you can get away with it, why can't I?
It's the reason we have any rules or policies or laws. It's meant to encourage positive behavior and discourage negative behavior. If we don't, it would just continue again with those people that have just decided, I don't wanna coach the day before because I don't feel like it. I mean, I'm sorry, only doesn't help kids. I mean, it's like, so if we don't have some sort of, you know, deterrent, it's like, oops, my bad, and then the next time, you know,
Oh, yeah, I meant-
oops,
I
my
meant to
bad.
tell
It's
you.
like speed limits. Why do we have any laws? It's meant to encourage positive behavior and discourage negative behavior. If we didn't have speed limits, we probably would have more people speed. You know, and it's only a bad thing if you speed. It's not like this is applied uniformly to everybody and it's negative. It's, again, only a bad thing if person chooses to not be respectful and communicate 30 days. It is rare, you're right, that's a great point. It's rare, it's more common than the teacher liquidated damages. We had 3 out of 27 in the last 3 years, 2 of which the board approved for extenuating circumstances, said, yep, no problem, you let us know 7 months in advance, you wanna retire mid-year, waived, done. But if somebody says, I took another job or whatever in August, I mean, there's a reason for that. It's now we're on the candidate pool B, C, or D.
I see Brian Johnson's online. Brian, would you like to comment on this?
Sure, Howard. You know, when we talked about this policy, I broke the policy down in my head as I was thinking about it into its parts. I think if we said and asked people, is it fair and reasonable to give us 30 days notice that you don't want to continue doing something? I think we'd all say that's reasonable. And I think if we said we're gonna leave it up to admin and the board to determine if there's an extenuating circumstance, I also think that's pretty reasonable. And then it comes down to the 15%. And as we looked at the value of that 15%, that seemed pretty reasonable. So those 3 pieces all together, I think made a pretty reasonable policy as an impetus or a motivation to give us some timely communication.
Okay.
Does that make Howard?
Would that, I guess, at this point, working on that communication, is it necessary to set this policy now, or can it be done at a later date? And allow the directors to have a chance to communicate this to the coaches as a possibility?
Well, Howard, the good news is we purposely, we went round and around on 60 days, 30 days, you know, and with just the current situation of what we're living in right now, we we intentionally said, let's not put a start date on this, because honestly, Pam is still working on contracts for next year anyway. So this won't even exist, nobody has signed a contract yet anyway. So it's not like people are gonna have this hanging over their head and now, boy, I gotta make a decision with everything else going on in the world at the same time as a liquidated damages thought in the back of my mind. And then the second thing, quickly, you know, it is very rare, and I'll tell you, I always want to go on record, 99% of the people of SCC are doing exactly what you guys are saying. They know that it's gonna take work to replace them, and they're reaching out well in advance of 30 days. I mean, a lot of them, it's the end of the season, hey, Chance, I just wanna give you a heads up, next year, this is happening in my life, I just wanna be fair to you. And I could go back to the 37 resignations last year, and I bet you 35 or 36 of those people sent a very nice email to Pam or Jason or me and said, hey, I just wanna give you as much notice as possible. So it is very rare, but it does happen, and that's the whole reason why we're even having this discussion.
Okay.
I guess I would go back to the same thing that I asked the last meeting though, it isn't about putting it in, like I understand fair and reasonable in the contract and everything, it's just, if this is a problem we're concerned about, will it solve it, yes or no? Like, I mean, do we have confidence that this will solve it, right? So we've had 10, does success look like it's 7, or does success look like it's 6, or like, you know, like, what does that look like? Or do we have to do more than this if it's that big of a problem? I guess is more of my question, like, how do you know this fixes it? Or are we confident that that would reduce it appropriately?
Well, it won't, if the teacher liquidated damages is any indication, you know, it doesn't stop it. It doesn't. What I don't know is how many it prevents.
Yeah, it's tough to know what the reduction is without doing some kind of exit interview to say, if we didn't have this policy, would you have been gone
Yeah.
earlier, would you have waited longer? I don't know that there's any reasonable way for us to get to that data.
How many accidents are prevented by imposing stricter speed limit
You know,
signs and all? I don't
I
know
guess-
how to answer that.
Another off-the-wall question that I will throw out there is, if we've had 10 resignations that fit this situation, how many people does that 10 involve? Is it 10 different people, or are we looking at one person that is responsible for multiple resignations over the years?
Probably didn't.
Or how many situations are we in that?
Well, I can speak to the last 3 years. Of those 10, it's 8 different people.
Okay,
So there were some repeat in terms of certain activities, but for the most part, they
Okay.
were different people.
But Chance, you had said there has definitely been some extenuating circumstances, and the administration board, whoever has said, yes, there's extenuating circumstances here, we're all good, don't worry about it, we're not gonna hammer on you.
Without a doubt, and I mean, I one specific example, I won't say what this activity was, because it would be pretty obvious what it was. But she came to Pete and I and said, just kind of laid it all out there and said, this is what's happening, this is how it's impacting the other parts of my job, and, can you guys help? And we did, we went to work and we reached out to people that we figured, could fill in for her, and it worked out great. And she was in a better place, the person that came on board did an amazing job, and I without question, you guys would have said, nope, that's an extenuating circumstances, we're not gonna tack on a 15% penalty to her as well. And I would guess, looking at this list, the ones that I know of, I would say probably half you guys would have done that, and the other half, probably not.
So I'm opposed for a number of reasons. First off, I come from small business, I hate rules. More rules, more rules, more rules. I'm just, that hasn't worked for me in the past. I like adult culture, and we need to cultivate better communication, have a calendar of when those dates start. Maybe the biggest issue that I have is privacy issues. Maybe it's none of our business what mental health issue or physical health issue or whatever the person has. And we shouldn't make them come in front of us and say, this happened to me, or this is my situation. So I think we're strongly reacting to something that doesn't need a strong reaction.
And I would say, if it were me, I'm a very private person on lots of things like that, and so I think that's a very good point, Scott.
I look at it, I guess, that I would not ask for details. I guess I would approach it differently, for me, I look at this as being consistent. Like I say, when I look at teachers versus coaches doing the same thing, whether the teacher is teaching algebra or math or language, social studies, art, or they're teaching basketball, they're teaching track and field, they're teaching cheerleading, they're teaching something, and this is in place for the teachers, and coaches are teaching something. I see this as just being consistent. I just don't see what the problem is here, but that's just my
I think too,
personal take on it.
you look at $3,000 contract, that's $450, it's quite a bit more than if you compare it to the $1,000 teacher leave amount, if you're looking
As a percent, you mean?
percentage wise, yeah. I don't know, I feel like we're still a small district and we just keep getting bigger with our policies. Is that a good thing? I don't know.
Okay,
How do we determine which policies and rules we should have, shouldn't have?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's where I tend to lean more to the side of consistency across the board. We're trying to get all of our staff to 110%, all of our staff with certain benefits, all of our staff treated the same as other staff. This is simply treating coaches the same as we treat teachers. I don't buy the percentage, I guess, because you're looking at just the contract amount. When you look at the total package, the percentage is way off on what they'd have to give up. On top of that, I think the district has shown, whether it's the board or whether it's administration, that we understand there are extenuating circumstances, and I don't think we're gonna ask somebody to delve through their medical files to prove to us that we wanna know exactly what's going on. I mean, there are some privacy issues there as well. I mean, obviously we can't break any kind of HIPAA laws, that kind of stuff. We wouldn't ask someone to do that kind of thing. I just don't see that we have shown in the past that we're abusive with the policy on the teacher side, and I don't know why there would be any expectation differently on the coaching side, and to me, this is just being consistent.
One difference that I see between the two is when we post a teacher job and get 35 applications, and we post a coaching job and have to go beg somebody to do it, there's a significant difference in that, and I just don't see adding any even perceived obstacles to extracurricular contracts being beneficial to the district.
I guess
I wouldn't wanna make exceptions on the coaching side the same as we don't make exceptions on the teaching side. It might make it more difficult, but you might weed out the person who thinks, yeah, you know what? I don't know if I'm that committed. Maybe I don't wanna apply. Good. Maybe we didn't want them in there if they're not that committed. I don't know. Maybe they'd be great. I don't know. But we're talking hypotheticals. I just look at that as consistency.
I guess the question that I would have is this something the athletic council, activities council could handle on their own? With the caveat as if they don't deal with it, then the administration and board will. Is that a possibility? Any response, Chance or Brian?
Off the top of my head, I'll go to work on anything, but we're talking 62 people again, Howard, and there's a wide range of things that fall under this umbrella.
And after the last meeting, you asked me to email, and I emailed all staff, and you heard from one current coach out of the 62. I don't know if, I think no response is a response as well. I mean, one coach replied and repeatedly asked why, which I think we've provided the answers to multiple times now.
And Tim, sorry, it wasn't written, but, two different middle school coaches, just in passing, asked me about your email and said, am I supposed to reply to that? I said, only if you have thoughts on it, and they all separately said, I actually thought that was something that already was in place. They thought it was standard contract, equity that would have already been in there. So those were the two, that wasn't written or formal feedback, but just the two comments that I had made to me since our last meeting.
We presented facts and data, and Ben Shapiro, I'm a big fan of, he says facts don't have feelings, you know, and we presented the facts, you know. One of the arguments is asked 5 different people, 5 different districts, and they chuckled at it. I don't know if that's irrelevant.
That's not a fact.
That's not a fact. I mean, I don't get that. I also want to clear up his email that said Mr. Whitaker has proposed cutting all spring activities pay. That is not a fact. That's a mistruth. It was in a wage and benefit committee. I was asked to present facts. I presented the numbers, how much spring coaches' pay is, and 1/3 had already been paid. And if the other 2/3 were to be held, what that number was. So I never proposed cutting it. Number one, everybody had received 1/3 of their pay already. I never was asked for a recommendation, and I never gave it. I certainly didn't propose cutting it. I gave data on which schools were paying, which weren't, and which ones were paying partially, and I gave the numbers as to what that number would be if we didn't pay. I never was asked for my recommendation. The group said, let's pay them all. If I was asked for my recommendation, it would have been to survey the 62 people, or the spring coaches pay coaches only. I would have asked them, would have been my next step, but I never was. So I want to clear that up. That's not putting words in my mouth. That's misrepresentation of the truth.
Well, just for the record, my opposition isn't based on either of the letters written by coaches or administrator or whatever. Mine is based on, when in doubt, don't add policy. That's to me the beauty of a small district is it's a small district, and if a couple people